September 2000, Dallas, Texas. The air in the boardroom on the 27th floor of the Renaissance Tower was freezing cold, but the two men sitting on one side of the massive oak table were sweating. Reed Hastings and Mark Randolph, the founders of a small, struggling startup called Netflix. They were exhausted. They were losing money. They were desperate. They had flown to Dallas to meet the emperor of the home video world, John Antioco, the CEO of Blockbuster. Blockbuster was a titan. It was invincible. It had 9,000 stores around the globe. It had 60,000 employees. It generated billions of dollars in revenue every single year. The blue and yellow ticket stub was a symbol of American culture. Netflix, on the other hand, was nothing. A tiny website mailing DVDs to people who didn't even have DVD players yet. Reed Hastings took a deep breath. He looked Antioco in the eye and made his pitch. "We will run your online brand. You focus on the stores. We will become Blockbuster.com, and in exchange, you buy us." Antioco leaned back in his expensive leather chair. "How much?" he asked. $50 million, Hastings said. The room went silent, and then something happened that would haunt the business world for decades. John Antioco struggled to suppress a smile. Then he laughed. He didn't just say no. He laughed them out of the room. He told them that the dot-com hysteria was over. He told them that their business model was a joke. He sent them home empty. That laughter was the most expensive sound in history, because today, Blockbuster is gone. It is extinct, a relic of the past. And Netflix is worth over $250 billion. How did a giant with unlimited resources lose to a startup with no money? How did the king of movies miss the biggest revolution in entertainment history? The answer isn't just technology. It's not just the internet. It is a story of arrogance, greed, and a $40 late fee that changed the world. This is the story of how Blockbuster committed suicide. To understand the death of Blockbuster, we have to go back to 1997. Reed Hastings wasn't trying to start a revolution. He was just a guy who forgot to return a movie. He had rented Apollo 13 from his local Blockbuster. He lost the cassette. By the time he found it, 6 weeks had passed. He walked into the store, ashamed, and handed over the tape. The clerk typed into the computer and said, "That will be $40. Hastings was shocked. $40. That was more than the price of buying the movie. He paid the fee, but as he walked out, his stomach turned. He was embarrassed to tell his wife. But on that walk home, a thought hit him. Why do I have to pay a fine for being late? At the time, Hastings had a gym membership. He paid a flat fee of $30 a month, and he could work out as much as he wanted or as little as he wanted. No late fees, no penalties. Why couldn't movie rentals work like a gym? That was the spark. But there was a problem. VHS tapes were huge. They were heavy. Mailing a VHS tape back and forth would cost a fortune. The business model was impossible, until he heard about a new technology being tested in Japan. A shiny, thin, lightweight disc called a DVD. It was small enough to fit in a standard envelope. It was light enough to mail for the price of a single stamp. Hastings drove to the nearest post office. He bought a music CD, put it in an envelope, and mailed it to his own house. The next day it arrived, unbroken. That was the eureka moment. Netflix was born. But birthing a company and keeping it alive are two very different things. In the beginning, Netflix was a disaster. We look at it now as a tech giant, but in 1998, it was a logistics nightmare. They weren't a streaming company. They were a postal service. They had to buy thousands of DVDs. They had to buy thousands of envelopes. And the United States Postal Service was a machine designed to crush fragile objects. In the first few months, discs arrived at customers' homes cracked, shattered, or missing. The team had to experiment with hundreds of different envelope designs, padding, and packaging just to get a movie from point A to point B in one piece. And nobody cared. In the late 90s, almost no one had a DVD player. They cost over $500. Why would you rent a DVD if you couldn't watch it? Netflix was bleeding cash. They tried selling DVDs. They tried renting them à la carte. Nothing worked. Then, in 1999, they made a radical decision. A decision that went against everything the industry believed. The subscription model. No due dates, no late fees, no shipping costs. Keep the movie as long as you want. When you're done, mail it back, and we'll send you the next one on your list. Customers loved it. It was freedom. It was the exact opposite of the Blockbuster experience. But there was a catch. The more customers loved it, the more money Netflix lost. Shipping costs were eating them alive. The faster people watched movies, the more postage Netflix had to pay. By the year 2000, the dot-com bubble had burst. Investors were fleeing. Netflix was on track to run out of cash within months. That is why they flew to Dallas. That is why they begged Blockbuster to buy them. They weren't trying to conquer the world. They were trying to survive. They offered the keys to the kingdom to John Antioco, and when he laughed at them, something changed in Reed Hastings. On the flight back to California, the despair turned into rage. And that rage turned into focus. They weren't going to sell anymore. They were going to kill the giant. Why did Blockbuster say no? Was John Antioco stupid? No. He was a retail genius. He had built empires before, but Blockbuster had a dirty secret, an addiction they couldn't break. Late fees. In the year 2000, Blockbuster made $800 million purely from late fees. Think about that. 16% of their entire profit came from penalizing their own customers. Their business model relied on making their customers angry. If Blockbuster bought Netflix, they would have to eliminate late fees. They would have to tell their shareholders, hey, we are going to delete $800 million from our balance sheet. Wall Street would have panicked. The stock would have crashed. Antioco was trapped. He was handcuffed to a dying business model because it was too profitable to quit. This is the innovator's dilemma. When a company is so successful at doing the old thing, they cannot switch to the new thing, even if they see it coming. Blockbuster looked at Netflix and saw a flea. Why should we worry about a mail-order company? They said. People like going to the store. They like the impulse buy. They like the popcorn. They were wrong. People didn't like the store. They tolerated the store because it was the only option. As soon as a better option appeared, loyalty evaporated. By 2004, the flea had become a wolf. Netflix was growing exponentially. Millions of subscribers. The word of mouth was unstoppable. Have you tried Netflix? No late fees. Blockbuster finally woke up. John Antioco realized his mistake. He saw the numbers. He realized that the future was online. So, he did something incredibly brave. He decided to fight back. He launched Blockbuster Online. It was a direct clone of Netflix, but it was better. Antioco used his greatest asset, the stores. He created a program called Total Access. You could rent a DVD online, get it in the mail, watch it, and then return it to a physical Blockbuster store to get a new movie instantly. It was a game changer. Netflix couldn't do that. Netflix had no stores. Blockbuster customers loved it. They were signing up in droves. Netflix's growth stalled. For the first time, Reed Hastings was terrified. Blockbuster was actually winning. In 2006, Netflix shares dropped. Analysts were saying Blockbuster had figured it out. They had the physical presence and the online convenience. Antioco had a plan to kill Netflix once and for all, but the plan was expensive. To make it work, he had to cut the late fees. He had to spend hundreds of millions on marketing. He needed time. He needed patience. But Wall Street has no patience. Enter Carl Icahn. Carl Icahn is a legendary activist investor. In the business world, he is known as a shark. He buys huge chunks of companies and forces them to make changes to boost the stock price immediately. Icahn bought a massive stake in Blockbuster and he was furious. He looked at Antioco's plan and saw only one thing: spending. Why are we spending millions on this online thing? Icahn argued. Why are we cutting late fees? That's free money. Icahn didn't care about the future. He didn't care about 10 years from now. He cared about the stock price today. He started a war in the boardroom. He called Antioco a fool. He turned the shareholders against him. Stop wasting money on the internet, Icahn demanded. Focus on the stores. Raise the prices. Bring back the fees. It was a battle for the soul of the company. On one side, the CEO who saw the future but needed to spend money to get there. On the other side, the investor who wanted immediate profit. The investor won. In 2007, John Antioco was pushed out of the company. He was fired. Carl Icahn installed a new CEO, James Keyes. Keyes was a retail guy. He ran 7-Eleven. He knew how to sell Slurpees and hot dogs. He didn't know anything about technology. One of his first moves, he canceled the online streaming project. He pulled back on the internet platform. He said famously, "I don't see this Netflix thing as a threat. We are going to focus on what we do best, the physical stores." At Netflix HQ, Reed Hastings must have popped champagne. The giant had taken off its armor and laid down its sword. The rest of the story is a slow, painful tragedy. In 2007, Netflix introduced streaming. At first, the quality was bad. The selection was limited, but it was instant. You clicked a button and the movie started. Blockbuster ignored it. They were busy trying to sell candy and toys in their stores to make up for lost revenue. Then came 2008. The financial crisis. People stopped spending money. But Netflix was cheap. For $8 a month, you had unlimited entertainment. It was recession-proof. While the rest of the economy collapsed, Netflix skyrocketed. Blockbuster was bleeding. They had thousands of expensive leases for their stores. They had to pay rent, electricity, and salaries for 9,000 locations. Netflix had servers. The math was brutal. Blockbuster's debt piled up. They tried to launch kiosks to compete with Redbox, too late. They tried to launch streaming again, too late. In 2010, exactly 10 years after they laughed at Netflix in that boardroom, Blockbuster filed for bankruptcy. The stores closed one by one. The blue and yellow signs were taken down. The shelves were emptied. A $5 billion empire evaporated into thin air. Today, if you travel to Bend, Oregon, you will find the last Blockbuster on Earth. It operates as a tourist attraction, a museum. People go there to buy t-shirts and take selfies. It stands as a monument to nostalgia. But for business leaders, it stands as a tombstone, a warning. The story of Blockbuster is not about bad luck. It is about the danger of success. Blockbuster died because they loved their past more than their future. They died because they listened to their accountants instead of their customers. They died because they thought they were too big to fail. Reed Hastings and Netflix didn't kill Blockbuster. Blockbuster killed itself. They had the chance, they had the brand. They even had the offer to buy Netflix for the price of a private jet. But they chose the $40 late fee. They chose the short-term profit. And in the game of business, if you choose the present over the future, you become history.